Welcome to Driven to Create, the podcast that explores the journeys of those who can't help but bring their ideas to life. Today's episode is called Quiet Automations. So I think we're definitely in a transition moment. We've gotten a taste of LLMs and AI, but I think that the main course is yet to come. And the reason why I say this is because chat windows aren't the most efficient way to solve a problem or get work done. Humans are typically the stopgap in that. And I think, true automation comes when the tools, the AI tools, are embedded into the workflows that we do every day. So this is Driven to Create. Let's get into it. Okay, so I think that there are a number of reasons why the chat window, LLM chat window, OpenAI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, you got a bunch of them, DeepSeek. I think that it unlocked kind of the potential of what, people could do if they had a true co-pilot next to them. But I think, there are a lot of things that chat windows restrict in terms of really having a seamless workflow. Like chatting with LLMs is super helpful, and it definitely has changed a lot of businesses already and stuff like that. But it's opposite to how humans truly work. We're in many different programs at a time. We're jumping from task to task. It's asynchronous work. So chat-based workflows are kind of like single-threaded. If you think about it like computer terms, you can only do one operation at a time. And that's where, it introduces problems, especially since as you get bigger and bigger chats, the AI LLM cannot keep up, and it will lack the full context of what you're working on. Without being completely embedded into the workflow, it can't see everything. So it's trying to interpret what is the most important stuff. What is the most important task? What is the most important information? Things like that. And the other thing is that large context windows, like right now we have LLMs that can store a lot of information. But they often misinterpret the priorities, in terms of it doesn't really know what you want unless you keep it within strict guardrails. So as a result, the chat windows often fail at keeping the user on task, in terms of what's the grand goal of what we're trying to do with this project, whatever you're doing. You might have a number of tasks that you've created for it, but at the end of the day, it's just going to try to solve each task sequentially. It's not going to look at the bigger picture. So it's important to create these milestones where you'll have it do a block of tasks and then kind of take a look at what you've done. Does it still align with what we're trying to do? And then move forward. So no one really wants to do this because it's super easy to get addicted to having something do something for you. And once you get that speed going, you don't really want to stop. So the chat windows really aren't ideal for this type of work. People are generally visual creatures. So seeing where you're at, where you're trying to be at all steps of the process is super helpful, and it's definitely helpful for the LLM to know where it stands and what to prioritize. So we still have to be the main guidance, and I'll get into different ways that we can do this where the AI will start orchestrating itself. But that's one of the big issues right now, which is why when people go on sites like Lovable or V0 from Vercel, and they want to create a landing page for something, those programs are great, but they'll only get you 80% of the way there, 80 to 85% of the way there. And then when you want to make a tweak, it might struggle. You need that human intervention to keep a project on track. And another big thing with chat windows is, and this is my experience, but most people are not good communicators. I'm sorry, you might fall into that crowd. I think I'm a good communicator, but I'm verbose, so it's a little bit tiresome for humans. The LLMs seem to be doing pretty good with chatting with me, but I could tell you a few people who get a little tired of my tangents and stuff like that. But the mental load from working within a chat window it's really something that shouldn't be discounted. And oftentimes you might save time doing a specific task with AI, but you might spend even longer trying to communicate what the heck you want. And I think a lot of people lose track of that too, especially if their mental load is up here and they're really having a tough time on like just saying like, can't you just do what I'm thinking? Well, it's not psychic. So, ultimately that's where chat windows are going to fail. So, moving on from where we are to where we're going, because the cracks are already starting to show, even these professional tools that everyone uses, Cursor for coding, Replit, V0, Lovable, and then even for image generation, like if you use Midjourney or Flux or Stable Diffusion, you still have to learn how to speak to it. And that isn't ideal for everybody, which kind of leads me to the point that the logical home for all AI is native inside of operating systems and the tools that you use. Because if we think about like humans have our senses, and whether or not it's like 5 senses or if it's like 50, I don't know where they landed on that. But, you could kind of think of the human body as a computer with a ton of sensors, like millions and millions of sensors, like, our skin, our taste, our hearing, sight, stuff like that, sense of smell, all that's providing info for the brain to process this stuff. And for AI to truly provide meaningful outputs, it needs to sense more things and compute that. How it prioritizes things, that's a different story. Somebody smarter than me will figure it out. But right now, the chat window is not really a great place for getting sensors because you can paste in images, and that definitely helps. You can paste in websites. That provides additional context. But, structuring the data that you send to the AI is more helpful because you could define design patterns. You can say what the overarching goal is, how to achieve that goal, how are the typical, how do you typically work, like things like that. So the old pattern, you ask questions, you read the answer, you copy it into another tool, rinse and repeat. Things are changing a little bit, especially with the chat windows becoming a little bit more dynamic, where I don't know if you've noticed, but ChatGPT and Claude will, if you're asking it to create some code, it'll open like a coding window and stuff like that. And OpenAI, I believe this week, just released agents. So it'll live on your operating system and orchestrate the data. That kind of opens up a lot of privacy issues. Even me, I'm a little reluctant unless it's like a truly local program to like, have it start seeing everything on my computer and learning everything about me. But in order to have true integration, these tools need to be embedded into the programs that we would use typically, or the workflow. If there's a predefined workflow, if you work in Asana and then you go to your email, then you go to your calendar, and then you do something in Figma, like there are ways to have like a closed loop with those, that workflow. But the new pattern of what everyone's developing for is, you start with the goal. You start with a goal, and you basically create a plan from that, and then have AI agents plan and orchestrate the whole thing. So, basically what an agent is just think of it as like a virtual coworker. Everyone has their own job title and stuff. So that's basically what you do. You take an agent, give it a specific role. So, get this information, search the web for this information. Okay, that's one agent. Then you need to make sure that that agent got the right info. So then you would create another agent that would validate that info. Those are just two examples. There's one way to look at this if you're a video person is, let's say you have a folder of 150 videos and you need to pull the transcripts from every single one. You can have an agent use OpenAI's Whisper AI model and pull the transcripts out of that and then save it to a doc. You can have an agent run that whole workflow and then automate that. So what would take ages or a ton of money in transcription, you could do that automatically. And so once everything's orchestrated, whatever system you have that integrates the AI, it would execute under the guardrails that you set. So you need to set the policies so AI can operate inside of that. So that, depending on if you're in code or not, with code that's setting, a schema for the data, like how is it structured? What are the relations between the different, between the data set and stuff like that. So, that's super important. MCP servers right now are like all the rage if you're like following AI and stuff like that. And, think of those as like little connectors, kind of like AI APIs. They're connectors that allow you to connect to an AI agent that does a specific function, returns the result to you. So that's gonna get big. It's a step in the right direction, but it's not, we're not quite there yet. So, in terms of like what I think we should do to design for this, I really think, maybe the principles of design. I think we should automate quietly, which kind of inspired the title of this episode. So rather than using the human to guide the entire process and hope that they understand the information, the AI should just progressively disclose, data at certain milestones. So like, here's the information, here's where we're at, here's milestone 1. Do you want to proceed? Do you want to look at what we've completed and make edits? Cool. The next thing is that agents should be pausable. It seems like, a no-brainer, but you should be able to stop an agent when it starts and still be able to get data. And on top of that, they should be reversible too. So like whatever changes this thing makes, so like, whatever changes it makes to your image or if it changes to your code, it should be reversible. A good example of who's doing that right now, I'm not sure of the others, but Cursor for coding, they basically have checkpoints. Replit has it too, replit.com. And they have coding agents that'll actually create something for you. So if it said, make me a sign-up form that has multi-step questions and stuff, Replit can do that, and it basically just creates checkpoints after a certain number of tasks are completed. It's getting there, not quite there yet. It still kind of falls into that AI trap once in a while, once it, if it gets confused, but it does a pretty good job at keeping like mini milestones on like, let's not get too far before we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Another example of what Cursor's doing is they allow you to define rules, basically create the guardrails for how the AI should code and stuff like that. Those guardrails should take precedence over all the tasks because those are what you will create the boxes for. So if you do work with clients and stuff, you'll always have those boxes that you're in. You might not always see them, but you always do know them. We need to do the same thing for AI. We need to say, always do this, never do this, do blah, 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 blah. Have a bunch of rules that inform them how to act, how to do work. And the other thing too is, like every time you call an AI tool to do some work, it should be treated almost like a render job. Like it should be time stamped. It should have what the input was and what the output is, and all that should be stored. Plus, that'd be super useful later on, especially when you, if you go to fine tune things or train a model, that'll be useful data. But it'll also make it easier for you to roll back any changes if you needed to. So, in terms of how to start building this stuff, in terms of agents too, because like a lot of people like confuse the term a little bit. So there's agentic workflows, and then there's agents. Basically, an agent is, I just think a virtual worker. I mean, some other people might disagree with me, but there'll be a virtual worker with a specific job title that does a specific set of tasks and then returns the result. So maybe like a micro intern or something. But how we can start building these little agents. One recommendation I would have is solve one headache at a time. That's one thing that I've learned. So, like I mentioned before with the transcripts, like if there's one problem that you're looking to solve, try to write code that, creates an AI agent that just does that. It might be fun, even if you could do it with normal code. Like, let's say you had to rename a bunch of things. You could do that with normal code. You don't need AI. But sometimes it's a little helpful exercise just to make sure that it's doing what you want. Because oftentimes that's the problem, is like you'll get a lot of great stuff and then it'll hallucinate something and it's like, where the heck did that come from? Yeah, so start with one little headache at a time. Like if you have a folder full of 480p video clips and you want to upscale them to 1080 or Ultra HD, you can write an agent for that. That basically, that's a little bit more complicated because you might be leveraging two different AI models to do that, but that sort of thing. Just focus on one thing and see if you can measure the result. And then develop plugins that go with the programs that you use every day. Like try to abstract away the prompting. I feel like we've become really dependent on prompting. And one thing that we're doing, my partner and I, Tori, when we're building Epically, is we're abstracting away all of the prompt. There's no prompting in our application unless you want to chat with your brand guidelines, which that's available if you want to. But in order to create content, like you shouldn't have to prompt your way through it. You should go through a workflow that feels familiar to you. So that's one thing that we want to do, is actually create these integrations, with these different editing applications and stuff like that, where the AI functionality can live within it rather than forcing you to go to 50 different softwares. That's always a nightmare. And then, I think we always need to measure the difference in time. Like if we're using AI, it should save time. It shouldn't take more time in order to save time. Granted, you can always front load the process where you're like, I know I have to like make this thing and it's going to save me loads of time moving forward, but it's going to take me the next 3 days to do. Okay, that's great. But if every time you go to use AI and you're spending the same amount of time for the same headache and maybe a slightly better result, you'll have to weigh your options on that. So like time the task before, time the task after automation, and see what works, what works best with you. And then, why does this matter right now? Well, like I mentioned in the last episode and probably a couple other episodes, because I always forget what I say. the ground floor continues to rise. So anyone can start making tools. And even if you've never touched code, you don't even know what you're looking at, try going on v0.com today, or go on Lovable. I think it's lovable.co, whatever, or replit.com, and just try to make something. Like if you sell, if you sell products, try to make like a nice little wait list, for this product release. Go on there and say, create me a landing page that has a interactive wait list where customers can see how many people who have already registered, and show me a countdown until launch. Like, I guarantee you'll have something that looks great and it will work great, because that's pretty simple. I encourage anyone to try that today. So yeah, I think the move away from chat windows is gonna really open up a lot of new possibilities with workflows, because I think that's in my experience too. I've seen a lot of people dabbling in AI, and definitely more creative folks and more technical folks. They're dabbling. But in terms of like larger teams and everything, I think there's going to be a really difficult time into integrating these tools into the processes until they can get like a predictable result. And that's another thing I'm working on too, but yeah, that's for another day. It's for Epically, but it's a different functionality. But like, in order to really use these tools to the utmost abilities, if you're in a team, is to weave them into the day-to-day workflows. So it's the move away from chat is definitely the end goal there. So, chat showed us what we needed to see. It showed us what we needed to see to like visualize the opportunities in front of us. And like, I know there's some people have a knee-jerk reaction to AI and they're afraid of people getting replaced and stuff like that. And that's all valid. Every concern that somebody might have is totally valid. But in terms of how to make us more productive or efficient, or even unlock new abilities, we'll have to seek ways to like integrate these things into our existing workflows, not upend the entire workflow just to play with the next shiny object that makes pretty pictures. So if you aren't technical, please, somebody reach out to me. Like somebody who's like, I've never touched JavaScript. I can barely use Photoshop. I can barely use After Effects, but I did, I went on to replit.com, or I went on to V0 and I made this. Like, please send it to me. I would love to see that. It's super cool. So, as usual, write, comment, and subscribe. And if you find this content valuable, share it with one friend. That's it. Just one friend. Because like for a while, I didn't want to talk about AI because I didn't want to be like, I didn't want to try to be like an AI influencer. I'm just somebody who happens to use it and happens to develop for it. But, first and foremost, I've always been a creative professional. And that's always my main goal is like, how do I get the skills and how do I get the tools to make things I never thought I'd be able to make? So that's kind of what I'm talking about now. Not every episode is going to be about AI. There's a lot of stuff changing, so it all seems very relevant. But, let me know what your thoughts are. If you want to see more AI content, if you want to see less, well, sorry, I'm probably still going to talk about it. But, but I'm happy to discuss, any of the ethical concerns or stuff like that, because I think, with a lot of great opportunities, there's a lot of crappy things that come with it. And it's just finding a way to like survive along the way. So this is Driven to Create. See you later.